Hi everyone, welcome back to Uncomfortable Conversations. This episode is called Building Culture That Lasts from Intent to Integrity. And today's conversation is one I've been looking forward to for a very long time. It's a full circle moment for me because the idea of this very podcast was first born at CAE in a conversation with my guest today, Natalie, who at the time was the People Services Director at CAE. We spent a fair few years having the kind of uncomfortable conversations that most people avoid about leadership, resiliency, grit, honesty, accountability, and the wonderful, messy, sometimes beautiful world of building a culture that actually lasts. Natalie has always inspired me with her integrity, her clarity, and her deep belief that culture isn't something you say, it's something you live and you do. And the impact of her work is clear because years later, people who have worked within that culture still stay connected, still carry those values with them, and they still speak about the experience that they've had with pride. In this episode, we're going to be talking all about what it really takes to build a lasting culture, the difference between engineered versus organic, and how you can live up to that and how you can genuinely bring culture into a business. Natalie, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so happy that you're here with me. Thank you for giving me the time. Would you like to just take a few moments, just introduce yourself and maybe share a little bit about your career, how you've got to where you are today and the journey that you've been on?
Sure. Thank you, Louise. Thanks for that introduction. So, as you said, my name's Natalie, most recently People Services Director at CAE Technology Services. Previous to that, I've worked across engineering businesses, technical and not-for-profit. I've worked as a personal development coach, helping hardest to help groups, which I think has been a great foundation to my passion actually for organisational culture and getting the best from people.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Today we're obviously going to start digging into to culture, to what it's really like to build or almost create that blueprint for a culture. So starting maybe one of the biggest ones. Let's kick off with one of the big uncomfortable ones. What does an authentic, healthy culture actually look and feel like within a business? How do you know that it's right?
So for me, I think it's about there being no surprises. I know that's quite a lot to ask in a work environment because there are always those types of sort of surprises that came up. But I think where people are shocked with something that's happened, something is completely unexpected. And out of shock, you never get a good reaction, do you? So you might get anger, resentment, grief, all of these types of emotions come up. So I think for me, it's an environment where there are no surprises, where people are communicated with, where they're told what they need to know and when they need to know it, which I think is really crucial because everyone wants to know more than they need to know before they need to know. But timing, I think, is key. I think also to provide people with the right tools and support to actually get on with their jobs, so then they're empowered, but they know what part they play in that bigger picture. There's nothing worse than sitting in a role and not really understanding why you're doing something. So really connecting people. And I think for me, that shows up when people want to come to work, where burnout can't actually exist because people enjoy what they do, where people, will get home and go, right, I can't wait to log back on and get that done. Now, we don't expect that, but when people want to do that, that's connection, that's culture. That's where people go, I'm really bought in and connected to what we're doing and why we're doing it. I think it shows up in the people.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talk about quite a lot, we put it in the title of the podcast today, that in being intentional, almost cultivating, if that's the right word to use, intentionally going out to create that culture within a business so that people do feel that they belong. They feel like they have that shared sense of purpose and direction and the values that make up that business. That's almost, it is something that has to be felt, isn't it? It can't just, it's not just something that you can say. And it's very obvious, I think, in businesses, and I'm sure you've seen this yourself as well, where people maybe it's talked about culture and values, and people say, oh yeah, we've got a brilliant culture, and everyone that does this, but when you go
Yeah.
into the business, you can't feel it. And I think
Yeah.
that's one of the things, particularly from CAE, and that, I sort of most felt, and most resonated with me and most admired about what you had created there, because it really had been building that from the ground up, top down, bottom
Mhm.
up, so that everyone in the business actually had that sense of feeling it and understanding it. How did you go about creating that, something that maybe wasn't there, and you built it and you put that time and energy into it?
So I think it's about capturing the essence of what was great in the first place and making sure that you don't lose that. I think as the business grew, people that have been there for a very long time were very protective of what was great to work about, to work for CAE. What was difficult was articulating it. So it needed to be architected in some ways, then people can repeat that, they can evolve it, they can be part of it truly. So I think for me, when it comes to organic or intentional culture, you need a little bit of both. If you don't have that architecture, if you're not engineering it, then everyone will just create their own version of what good looks and feels like, which will be a little bit like the Wild West. So some people then will feel very excluded and isolated because they don't have the opportunity to create their own version of the culture, or it's in conflict with somebody else's. So you need a status quo, excuse me, you
Mhm.
need a standard, you need a framework that aligns people enough. So then you've got your own identity, but also allows for that organic evolution, when it comes to culture, because to connect with it, to feel it, you have to own it. You can't have it dictated to you. You can't have somebody tell you how to feel. You are going to feel how you feel. So for me, it's setting out the framework and the baseline to say, actually, this is our standards, this is our values, this is our mission, this is our purpose, this is why we're doing it. It's up to you if you're bought into that or not. But this is how we work together as a team and as a
Mhm.
business for our customers, for each other. And then people will show up in their own ways, but very much aligned to that status quo. So I
Mhm.
think architected to a point, but not overly architected, because then it isn't authentic, it's not felt.
Exactly, exactly. And it's that difference, isn't it? I think between those small everyday actions that make the biggest difference when you're maintaining
Yeah.
that culture. So just on that, how does culture stay alive once it's been created? What do you do to nurture that and to keep it alive and to keep people bought into it, and keep that as the central focus?
I think listen, observe, feedback. That's really important. I think it's quite easy to put something out on a poster to share that with the business and expect everybody to live up to it. In reality, it doesn't need to be on a poster if it was as easy as that in the first place. So to always be listening, to checking, for those kind of dysfunctions that will exist in every single business and addressing them. Don't ignore them. Don't sweep it under the rug, because it will get bigger and bigger and uglier and uglier. So I think dealing with those problems up front is
Mhm.
really key. But holding each other to account respectfully, not aggressively, but respectfully holding each other to account. If someone makes a decision and you're sitting there thinking, doesn't quite align culturally with what we're standing out to do, which for us at CAE was doing the right thing. We always look to
Mhm.
do the right thing. So a couple of simple questions that I would use with leadership or with managers or anybody in the business was, how would you feel if that was you? If you was in that position, then what would you expect? Or, sometimes with leaders especially, when they've made a decision, I'd ask them, would you be happy to hold that decision up in front of the whole business and go, this is a decision that I've made?
Mhm.
And if you're not, then it's probably the wrong thing. And if you are,
Yeah.
then it's absolutely the right thing.
Mhm. It's almost that holding a mirror up to yourself, isn't it?
Yeah.
And can you look yourself in the eye and be
Yeah.
happy and stand by that? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah.
And yeah, almost sort of putting yourself in somebody else's shoes moment, I think.
You have to, and you're never going to get it right all of the time. And
Mm.
so it's admitting when you've got something wrong, admitting when you've
Mhm.
gone, hands up, that was a bad decision, but we're going to rectify it. We're going to come back to it. I think there's a lot to be said for that. I think it's a boost of trust and integrity when you can stand up and say, hey, that was wrong.
Absolutely, absolutely, because it's then authentic, isn't it? Because everyone makes
Yeah,
mistakes. You're
absolutely.
actually showing that that human, vulnerable side
Yeah.
to yourself in whatever role you have within a business, but particularly in a leadership role
Yeah.
in a business, to be able to actually have those. But and again, it comes back to culture. You have to have created that culture where you feel safe to be
Hmm.
able to be vulnerable and to be
Yes.
able to say we made a mistake, because you don't fear judgment, retribution, or anything else. You're
Yeah.
actually in that safety zone. You're within an environment
Yeah.
where you feel empowered to be able to say, we
Got
got
that
that wrong,
wrong.
or do you know
Yeah.
what, I shouldn't have said that. I think as leaders as well, being part of a
Hmm.
culture where you have teams and you have the responsibility for other people, and you're responsible for how they feel within a business, to be able to safely sit in a team. If you're saying to your team members who maybe look to you as a leader, this is a safe space, if you just tell me, if you make a mistake, it's fine. If you can show that to your team, if you can show that vulnerability to them first, and have that trusted two-way
Recently.
relationship and
Hmm.
conversation, that's how you're going to, it's
Yeah.
almost, that's how you foster that trust and that authenticity in relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah. You walk the walk. You show what it is to actually do that, and
Mhm.
you can't have that conversation and then next week you're in a disciplinary with Susan because she made a mistake. It's one of
No.
those things, is you actually have to deliver on it as well. And if
Mhm.
Susan was continually making mistakes, then that needs to be an uncomfortable conversation, right? But
Yeah.
if it's a one-off, then
Mhm. Yeah.
that needs to be
Yeah.
treated within the way that you would expect to be treated.
Mhm. Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And just thinking about this then, around creating a culture, nurturing it, it's all where we're sort of talking at the moment. It's all very representative of being in an office, of being
Hmm.
able to sit and have conversations and engage with people, and have that personal connection. How do you think, and do you have any experience of this that you can share? Businesses who are remote. So there's more and more of them now, these 100% remote
Hmm.
businesses. They don't have hubs, they don't have offices. How do you go about creating that when you're a remote business and you're not all in the office together to be able to do it?
Yeah. It's interesting because during COVID, we ran quarterly pulse surveys. So we surveyed more than ever during COVID. And our engagement rates were higher than they've ever been during COVID. We sat and said, well, isn't that amazing? I think at the time we had about 320 employees, so effectively 320 different locations, and everybody was more engaged than they've ever been.
Mhm.
And I think for that, so we put in our crisis communication plan. So we were communicating more than we've ever communicated. We intentionally put fun into our day because people were lacking it. We put community into our day. So we'd have different communities together. So where parents were homeschooling, I'm not sure I know anybody that enjoyed that, but that was a real thing. And it took for an employee at the time to say, I'm really struggling with this. It would be great to talk to my colleagues, to get together and talk about homeschooling. We started our Wellness Wednesdays during that time.
Mhm.
So that sense of togetherness, that sense of connection during a crisis, which it was, that sense of gratitude, and genuine care for one another, I think really, really came to the surface. So that was an interesting time. Now, holding on to that was difficult. Of course,
Mhm.
it was difficult because some people came back, some people didn't, and we had this policy in place, then we changed it. So it was difficult to get our standard in place, and we changed it a couple of times. Our engagement remained sort of really high, but we had pockets where actually it dipped. So we did change policy. I think policy is a big part of that, but
Mhm.
maintaining communication, maintaining celebration, and just having that connection. So we would run quarterly sort of all hands meetings where we would communicate with everybody on what's going on in the business and celebrate the wins within the business, not just customer wins or business wins, but personal wins too. So then we get that injection of connection that
Mhm.
means it fires people up for when they do go out off site or they're working remotely. So I think communication is key on that one, meaningful
Mhm.
communication and community.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And on the reverse side, then, Natalie, let's get into the uncomfortable part, shall we say. What happens when a culture is challenged? Because culture isn't static, it
Mhm.
gets tested by growth, by change, by people in the business. What lessons have you learned specifically around protecting culture and how you can maybe bring it back if you start to feel that it's losing its shape a little bit?
Yeah. So I think it's understanding what's jeopardizing the culture. Is it jeopardizing it or is it evolving it into what it now needs to be, to understand that? Because as much as we're all guardians of culture, we also need to be open to changing and evolving culture. It has to move with the business and with the different people that are going to show up in the business as well. So it's understanding what's adding to it and what's damaging it. And always going back to your blueprint of this is who we are, this is why we do it, this is what we do. And understanding, is it a danger to our culture? And that could be somebody who's been put into a leadership position, and they're not aligned with the culture. Well, that's going to ripple into the rest of that team. So for me, that's a structural thing or an educational thing or a coaching thing, to be able to go in and look at those kind of red flags across the business, and go and understand it. There have been other times where something has come up and you think it's not quite aligned with who we are. But actually, we've had a really good outcome from that. We've had a really good impact. I remember putting in place an employee forum,
Hmm.
which is quite
Yeah.
a unionised thing. And I was always a bit, oh, I don't know if it suits us culturally. And it did for a period of time until all of a sudden it wasn't driving the impact that we wanted to. It started to do something completely different. So, okay, it's time to rechange that listening initiative. We need to relook at that and say that's not fit for purpose anymore. So, being open to change, taking on feedback, but making those difficult decisions. If you've got someone who is in the wrong role at the wrong time, I need to have that conversation. If it were me, I would want to know.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about then nurturing and continuing to grow and evolve a culture, because businesses grow, you evolve that culture over time. How do you work with leaders within the business around recruitment? So where you're looking at bringing in new roles into the business and getting them to almost understand that mindset shift between culture fit versus culture add into the business.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think for years and years we've heard culture fit, culture fit. People would get rejections. Oh, you're just not a
Mhm.
cultural fit. I mean, what does that even mean? It really does make me wince. So we put in place some very tactical recruitment training where a lot of the things that we would put in place there were there to just inspire different ways of thinking, whether it was unconscious bias or
Mhm.
playing back to somebody. Can you imagine if you recruited a carbon copy of yourself? Would you like to really work with yourself? Because that's what you're looking for when you're recruiting, unless you think about what can someone bring to my team? What am I missing from my team? And we might use psychometric assessments for
Mhm.
that. To go, right, okay, well we've got a lot of dominance over here, but we don't have a lot of compliance. So I need somebody to
Mhm.
come in who's quite compliant, a perfectionist. So that's all culture add. But I think when people use it for recruitment decisions based on personality or those types of things, I don't think anyone
Mhm.
shows their personality in an interview anyway. It just seems a little bit, excuse me, it just seems a little bit weak from my
Mhm.
perspective. And I think if business needs to grow and evolve, then so does our culture, so does our people, so does the makeup of our
Mhm.
people.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you know, one of the biggest lessons that I took away from my time of working with you closely and in different sessions and different conversations that we'd had. One of the and it came through most recently in a job interview and a job change that I'm about to make. And we'd done some disc profiling with the different colours.
Yep.
And the lady interviewing me was saying we're all yellow. We're in the business. We've got a lot of yellow. And I came back to a conversation that we'd had, and where you had encouraged me to work with disruptors, people who weren't like me to bring a different lens and a different view.
Mm-hmm.
And because of those conversations, I could then bring that into that instant and that moment. And I literally went back to that. This is exactly the conversation that
Yes.
Natalie was having with me, to be able to say then, I'm a disruptor. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
yellow, because I know I'm not yellow. I have no
Yes.
yellow in my profile.
Exactly. So you've got your
This
boat
is
top on there as well.
I'm the opposite of that.
Yeah.
But what I can bring is that you know, I don't disrupt in a bad way, but it's understanding, okay, well, my strength coming into this is I'm very compliance focused, I'm very
Mm-hmm.
logical, I'm very process driven. I'm, you know, I can be creative, but if you're looking at bringing in somebody who can shake up the status quo a little bit in the business, and who is going to help you change and grow and evolve,
Yeah.
you might need a disruptor. You might need somebody in who
Yeah.
isn't yellow.
To bring that out in others, but to bring something else out in you. There's nothing worse than when you're faced with, you know, a strong personality type who won't move from it. It's almost an excuse. This is who I am. This is what colour I am. So this is how I behave, and that's that. And it's actually that's not really what psychometrics is all about. It's about understanding your preferred style. Everyone's got the ability to be something of everything, but then understanding others, then you can complement to really get that outcome. So I think that's a really good reflection of culture ad, actually. Really good.
Yeah. About legacy, legacy and leadership then. So you've built a lot of cultures. You've done it within a lot of businesses. I know that you talk about it quite a lot within different settings. You know, you do quite a lot of external speaking within the channel and within the community, particularly around building and nurturing that culture. What advice would you give to leaders who want to maybe leave behind a culture that endures?
I think make time for people. Set that bar for leadership high. I think if you're privileged enough to be in a leadership position, you should be honoured, you know, to fly that flag and constantly be raising the standard until someone comes along and raises it even higher than you did. And that's how we create those amazing workplaces. So I think making time to listen to people. We can get very busy. The amount of times where I would want to put on my sort of out of office or do not disturb or close my door, whatever it is, I'm not leading when I'm doing that. You need those times, of course you do, but make time for people. Find a way to genuinely care. I think you have to find your care, and if you can't, then you're probably in the wrong position, being honest. But raise the bar high. People will remember how you made them feel. I would rather that be a good feeling, personally.
Yeah, exactly. But what's one thing that you wish every executive understood about the power of building an intentional, authentic culture? Because you must have had some quite challenging conversations trying to build this within a leadership team, within a business.
There's lots of leaders that don't understand culture, aren't there? And it's someone else's job to do that. But I am seeing that change, actually. I think all the conversations that I'm having at the moment, you're definitely seeing a big focus on it, because if there's one thing that AI can't do, it's build culture. That's all down to people. That's people power. So I think that would be one thing, but it's not fluffy. It really isn't fluffy. It's about your systems. It's about your structures. It's about your decision making. It's about the speed of things, your dress code, your seating plans, your policies, your hybrid working approach. All of those things make up your culture. If you're saying that you're innovative, creative, and agile, but you've got policies with 25 steps just to make a decision on raising a recruitment requisition, guess what? You're not innovative and creative and agile. So I think for me, it's for leaders to understand and be open to culture isn't fluffy. Culture is the nuts and bolts and cogs of your business that make it work. It makes it turn. At what speed and, you know, in what direction you want that to go, that's up to that team to design it. And then it's up to people as to whether they want to join it or not, whether it's for them or not.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but yeah.
And it is messy, isn't it? It's messy, it's uncomfortable. You don't get it right first time. It takes time and it takes work and it takes effort. It takes a
Yeah.
lot of effort
Hmm.
to be able to do that. What's one let's final wrap up summary point from you, Natalie, if you've got one. What's maybe one uncomfortable truth that you've learned about culture and leadership?
Not all leaders understand culture. Um, I think for me that's factual, and I see it as a good challenge. I like to build those relationships with those leaders that think it's fluffy. I see it as a little challenge to go, I'm going to prove to you it's not fluffy, um, and they feel it themselves. So yeah, not all leaders get it.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Natalie, thank you so much. Let's end with what's one piece of advice for leaders trying to build or rebuild a culture right now?
I think my one piece of advice would be to be open, to be honest, invite feedback, and don't be afraid of change.
Perfect. Summed it up brilliantly. Thank you. Natalie, thank you
Thank you.
so much for joining me today, not just for the conversation, but for the honesty and wisdom that you've shared. What you've built and what you continue to stand for reminds us that culture isn't just a slogan or a strategy. It's a living, breathing ecosystem that really needs care, consistency, and belief in it. And maybe the biggest takeaway from today, when leaders truly invest in culture, not as a project, but as a promise, it lasts, becomes part of the story people tell long after they've all moved on, which is, I think, testament, Natalie, to you and to your leadership. So thank you so much for inspiring me, inspiring that belief in others, and for joining me today on this podcast. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.